Nestled beneath the Cascade Mountains, the town of Maple River had always worn peace like a badge of honor. With just under 9,000 residents, it was the kind of place where neighbors left their doors unlocked. Kids rode bikes until the porch lights flickered on, and the most scandalous news usually involved a bake sale disagreement at the local church. For 30 years, not a single murder had pierced the calm. That's why, when the masked man arrived, the town never stood a chance. It started on a Wednesday, hot, dry, and uneventful. The type of day that blurred into others during Maple River's quiet summers. Linda Parker, the town's only full-time journalist, was covering the opening of a new fishing gear shop. She barely noticed the stranger who drifted past the window. He wore a navy hoodie pulled tight around his face despite the heat. His hands were in his pockets. He didn't look at anyone. But Linda, who had an eye for the unusual, froze as something shifted in her gut. A chill. She shook it off. That night, 16-year-old Emily Monroe didn't come home. Her mother called the police just after 10:30 p.m. Emily had texted her around 9 o'clock saying she was walking home from her friend Sarah's house. A 15-minute walk through quiet, tree-lined streets, but she never arrived. The next morning, search parties spread through the town. Flyers with Emily's photo were taped to telephone poles and shop windows. Her face, smiling and bright, looked out over gas pumps, grocery aisles, and school hallways. But as hours passed, something dark settled over Maple River. Emily's phone was found near the edge of Lincoln Woods. Screen cracked, her last text still open. "I think someone's following me." Sheriff Bill Rudd had seen a lot in his 30 years of service. Accidents, overdoses, a few drunken brawls, but never this. He organized volunteers, scoured the woods, questioned neighbors. Nothing, until the blood. 2 days later, in a shallow creek running behind the elementary school, a shoe was found. Emily's. And not far from it, a trail of smeared red led beneath a thicket of brambles. That's where they found her, what was left of her. The news shattered the town. Church bells tolled. People wept openly in grocery store aisles. Candlelight vigils lit up the nights. But while the community clung together, the sheriff stared at something they couldn't yet see. Pattern. This wasn't random. This wasn't reckless. Whoever did this had taken their time. Word traveled quickly. The story hit state news, then national. Small-town innocence shattered by brutal murder. One headline read. But Linda Parker wasn't satisfied with headlines. She wanted the truth. She dug through archives, public records, cold case databases. And there, buried in a 1974 newspaper from Utah, she found a familiar face. Not Emily's, not the sheriff's. The same smile, the same eyes. The stranger who'd walked past the window. But that couldn't be. That man was dead. Executed in 1989. The article said so clearly, Ted Bundy, serial killer of more than 30 women, executed by electric chair. Still, she kept digging. Over the next week, more whispers crept through the town. A college girl went missing 2 towns over. A woman jogging near the river vanished without a trace. Witnesses spoke of a man in a hoodie, face hidden, watching. Linda's unease grew into fear. She remembered something Bundy was famous for, his charm, his ability to blend in, to become whoever people wanted him to be. What if this man was doing the same? Sheriff Rudd received an anonymous envelope postmarked from Maple River. Inside was a photograph, a blurry image of a man watching Emily Monroe's vigil from across the street. On the back, scrawled in shaky letters, "He's back." Panic gripped the town. Parents wouldn't let kids out of sight. Stores closed early. Rumors spread like wildfire. Some said it was a copycat. Others believed in ghosts. But one thing was certain. No one felt safe anymore. And somewhere, in the shadows of Maple River, the masked man watched. He always did. Because monsters don't die. They just learn how to wear new faces. The town of Summit Valley wasn't used to fear. It was the kind of place where kids rode bikes until sundown, where the mailman knew your dog's name, and where porch lights were more for ambience than protection. But after the discovery of Becky Hallstrom's body near the riverbank, everything changed. Her name was whispered like a curse. Parents clutched their children tighter. Women traveled in pairs. Doors that had been left unlocked for generations now bore new deadbolts and chains. Something dark had come to Summit Valley, and no one knew when it would strike again. Sheriff Tom Rourke hadn't slept in 2 days. The crime scene had been chaotic. Becky's car was parked a few feet from the overlook, keys still in the ignition. Her shoes were found near the trail, laid neatly side by side. Her purse, untouched. But her body had told a different story. The pathologist had struggled to find the right words. There had been ligature marks, bruises on the neck, blunt force trauma to the skull. But it was the precision of it all that made Tom's skin crawl. This wasn't a moment of passion. It was deliberate, calculated, ritualistic, just like the stories he'd read about the killings in Seattle and Utah and Colorado, killings that had stopped for a while only to now maybe begin again. Tom flipped through the old FBI files again. He had requested them under the pretense of research, but in truth he already knew. Something about the patterns screamed Bundy, and not just in methodology. It was the charm, the manipulation, the way the killer made his victims feel safe, right until they weren't. A week after Becky's funeral, it happened again. Jessica Ward, a 22-year-old nursing student, vanished while jogging near Summit Lake. Her roommate said she had just stepped out for a 30-minute run before dinner. She never came back. Her body was found 2 days later, posed on a picnic table deep in the woods. Her arms crossed over her chest, lips bruised, a single daisy placed in her hand. The town went into full panic. News crews swarmed in from Salt Lake. Cameras rolled constantly, capturing grief and suspicion. But behind the noise, Tom felt a sick sense of déjà vu. It was happening again. The same patterns, the same kind of girls, the same kind of terror. He reached out to the FBI field office. They sent Agent Claire Jensen, a profiler who had once studied Bundy's original spree. She arrived with a file 2 inches thick and eyes that had seen too much. "You're not crazy," she told Tom as they sat in his office, flipping through photos. "Everything here, the staging, the victimology, the method of approach, it's Bundy, or someone who studied him closely." Tom leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "That's not the kind of thing you can say to the press." Claire shook her head. "But it's the kind of thing you tell your people. Before more girls die." There were sightings. A man in a cast asking for help near the park. A charming stranger with a tan Volkswagen seen near the trailhead. Sketch artists worked overtime, churning out images that all looked vaguely similar. Tall, dark hair, clean-cut, polite. The kind of man you'd let carry your groceries. But the case broke open the night of the town hall meeting. A woman named Carla Simmons stood up, trembling. She said her niece, Lila, had come home one night rattled. A man had approached her in the library parking lot, asked for help loading books into his car. He said his arm was broken. Lila had agreed, but something felt off. He smelled like metal and sweat, and when she looked into his trunk, she saw plastic sheeting, a crowbar, and a roll of duct tape. She ran. He didn't chase her, just smiled. Claire and Tom looked at each other across the crowded room. This was it. The Bundy blueprint, line for line. The broken limb, the lured help, the weapon in the trunk. They pulled Lila in for questioning and she described the car. A gold sedan, old but clean. Partial plate number. The FBI cross-referenced DMV records. It led them to an apartment complex just outside town. Apartment 3B. The name on the lease was Daniel Myers, a quiet man in his 30s who worked night shifts at a nearby hospital. No priors, no red flags, but when they checked his employee file, Tom felt a chill. His listed emergency contact? A cousin in Washington, named Bundy. Claire and Tom moved fast. A warrant was signed before midnight. At 3 a.m., SWAT moved in. What they found was a shrine. Inside the apartment were boxes of newspaper clippings, photos, taped interviews of Ted Bundy. There were sketches, handwritten notes, and in the closet, trophies, earrings, scraps of fabric, a student ID card soaked in dried blood. And then there was the journal, hundreds of pages, descriptions, plans, entries written after each murder, reveling in the detail. The latest was dated 3 days ago. She cried when I told her she reminded me of Becky. Daniel was nowhere to be found. The town had gone quiet again, but not from peace. From the knowledge that the masked man hadn't disappeared. He was still watching, still planning, still hiding among them. The rain hadn't stopped for days. It poured from the gray Washington sky like grief from a broken heart, soaking the pavement, the trees, and the lingering sense of safety that once defined the town. At the sleepy Greyhound bus station in Olympia, the smell of wet concrete clung to everything. It was quiet, nearly empty. A single overhead light flickered, casting intermittent shadows on the bench where station manager David Collins sat flipping through an old newspaper. He didn't notice the man at first. Bundy moved like mist. Not a sound, not a breath too loud. He stood just outside the range of the flickering bulb, the lower half of his face hidden by the brim of a dark hat. His coat was soaked, clinging to him in folds. But it wasn't his appearance that made David stop turning pages. It was the eyes, cold, flat, like looking into a well with no bottom. "Bus to Spokane leaves in 20, David called out, trying to break the silence. The man didn't speak. He simply nodded, then stepped into the light. David caught a better look. Clean-shaven, handsome even, but with an aura that made your gut shift. Like something dangerous was smiling at you. He bought a ticket in cash. No ID, no small talk, just silence. And when he walked away, David noted something odd: the shoes. Leather, fine but scuffed at the toes, and soaked in mud. The kind you didn't get from city streets. That night, a waitress 2 towns over would vanish after her shift. Detective Claire Monroe was already on edge. The first body had put her there. The second body made her stomach twist. But the missing girl from the diner? That was the pattern. And patterns terrified her. The name Ted Bundy hadn't come up yet. No one knew he'd escaped. Not officially. But something told Claire she was chasing a ghost. Every lead led to silence. Every silence screamed back at her. She sat in her car outside the bus station, listening to the storm drum against her windshield. Earlier that morning, a man in a hardware store mentioned something strange. A customer buying duct tape, rope, and a shovel, all in cash. No name. Said he was headed to Spokane. She pulled security footage, got grainy images, and in one of them, she saw a face that seemed almost too clean, too calm. Bundy. She didn't recognize him by name yet, but her instincts were screaming. A few hours east, Bundy stepped off the bus into a town called Elkridge. Small, isolated, no more than 800 people. The kind of place where people don't lock their doors and still wave to strangers. He liked places like this. He found a room above a bait shop, paid in cash. The owner, a retired vet named Hank, asked where he was from. Bundy said Denver, or maybe Salt Lake. He couldn't remember, he joked. Hank laughed. Then Bundy smiled. It was always the smile. Within 24 hours, another woman disappeared. This time, a schoolteacher. 32, blonde. Last seen walking her dog. They found the leash in a ditch 2 miles from town. By now, whispers had started. And Detective Monroe had a name. The bulletin came from Colorado. Theodore Robert Bundy. Escaped convict. Suspected in the deaths of over 30 women. Known to use disguises. Intelligent. Charismatic. Extremely dangerous. Claire read it twice. Then she felt the bottom fall out of her chest. The man on the bus station tape. The hardware store customer. The eerie feeling she couldn't shake. It was him. She drove overnight to Elkridge, retracing the bus route. At each stop, she showed his photo. Most shook their heads. Some stared too long. Then, at a gas station outside Elkridge, the clerk leaned over the counter. He was in here. Bought gloves. Didn't blink once the whole time he was talking to me. Claire gripped the photo. When? Yesterday morning. It was getting too close. Too fast. She called the sheriff in Elkridge, but they didn't have the manpower. Said they'd look into it, but Claire could feel it in their voice. They didn't believe it. So she drove. through rain, through the kind of darkness that made even high beams feel pointless. She didn't stop until the bait shop sign came into view. And there, on the second-floor balcony, stood a man, smoking, watching. Bundy. He knew she was coming. He always did. But this time, something was different. Because Claire Monroe had studied monsters all her life. And this one had just made his last move. Rain returned to the town of Elk River like a shroud of mourning. It was light, misty, the kind that didn't cleanse, only chilled. Deputy Sarah Klein stood at the edge of the bridge on Willow Creek, where the water moved slow and black, and the trees wept with the weight of a storm that had no thunder. Her boots sank slightly in the mud as she looked out over the water. They found a shoe, a single women's flat, caked in river silt. Brown leather worn out. Sarah held the evidence bag tighter in her gloved hand. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was the first trace of Melissa Hayworth since the night she vanished from the Elk River Motel. The FBI profiler had arrived earlier that morning. His name was Marcus Lynn, a wiry man with graying temples and the kind of eyes that didn't blink much. He walked into the sheriff's office with a quiet presence, looking at the photos of victims laid across the board with the cool detachment of someone trained to find evil. He pointed at the pattern. Bundy had phases. He'd slow down, wait, then strike. He was methodical but adapted to location. This guy's doing something similar. Sheriff Holt crossed his arms. So you think this isn't a copycat? Lynn shook his head. I think this is personal. Whoever he is, he knows the town. He knew Melissa would be alone that night. Knew no one would hear her scream. The motel's front desk clerk, Tom, was brought in for questioning again. He'd already said he'd seen nothing unusual. But now his story faltered. He'd been drinking that night, didn't want to admit it before. He remembered Melissa talking to someone near the vending machines. Tall man, wearing a baseball cap. When shown a sketch of Ted Bundy from the 70s, Tom's face went pale. That's him. That's who she was talking to. Silence fell. Sarah and Holt exchanged glances. Of course, it wasn't literally Bundy. But the image, the style, the charm, it all felt calculated. Like the killer wanted to be him. The town was spiraling. Reporters swarmed in from St. Paul and even as far as Chicago. Bundy returns was the headline on more than one tabloid. Candlelight vigils were held. Parents clutched their daughters' hands tighter. The mayor considered imposing a curfew. No one went anywhere alone anymore. Then came the call from a woman named Teresa Langley. She lived just outside town, off Highway 48. Said a man had knocked on her door the night before, claiming his car had broken down. He was polite, well-spoken. Said his name was Todd. She let him use her phone but felt uneasy. His eyes darted around, too alert. She described him in detail. Baseball cap, tan jacket, brown boots, average build but intense eyes. Sarah and Holt responded immediately. When they arrived, they found footprints leading into the woods behind her home. Large, heavy, spaced like someone running. A search team combed through the pines until dusk. They found a campsite, hidden between trees, shielded from the road. There was a lean-to made of tarp and branches. Inside were snack wrappers, empty water bottles, a cheap burner phone, and newspaper clippings. Articles about Bundy, about Melissa, about Elk River's history of peace. But there was something else, too. A list. On a torn piece of paper, written in tight block letters, were names. Melissa's was at the top. Beneath it, two more. Claire Jensen, age 22. Waitress. Naomi Fields, age 17. High school senior. Neither of them had gone missing. Yet, the race was on. Police doubled their presence. Claire was placed under watch and moved in with her parents. Naomi was pulled from school and kept home. Yet the killer seemed to vanish. The woods held no new clues. The phone was a dead end. Forensic analysis revealed gloves had been worn. No DNA, no prints. But then the killer made a mistake. A surveillance camera outside a gas station just past the town limits caught him. For 14 seconds, he filled up a gas can. His face was shadowed by the cap, but it was clear enough to make out the make of his jacket. A tan workwear coat from a small Minnesota outfitter. Only 300 sold in the region. Investigators found a receipt matching that sale, bought in cash, but signed with a name, Kyle T. Bundy. He was mocking them. Kyle Thomas Bundy wasn't real, but the signature led them to a P.O. box rented in that name in Duluth. Inside, nothing but books on famous serial killers. Bundy, Gacy, Ramirez, and a journal. It wasn't a confession. It was worse. A manifesto. The writer called himself The Echo, said Bundy had been misunderstood, that fear was purity, that every scream returned order to a chaotic world. He wrote about Elk River, about the bridge, about Melissa's motel. He knew everything. Sarah sat with the journal for hours. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was close, that he'd watched them find the campsite, watched the vigils, maybe even walked past her in the grocery store. She flipped to the last page. There was no signature, no date, just one line written in bold. Slashing pen. The next one will scream your name. Her blood went cold. As night fell on Elk River, patrol cars rolled through every block. Helicopters buzzed overhead. But no one felt safe. Not truly, because the killer had turned his sights, and the hunter had become the hunted. Elk River had become a fortress of fear. Every porch light stayed on through the night. Every curtain barely cracked for a glimpse of shadows moving in the dark. Families gathered together in one room at night, sleeping in clusters, children too afraid to close their eyes. The killer wasn't just haunting the town, he was shaping it. Deputy Sarah Klein hadn't slept in 2 days. She kept replaying the line in the manifesto over and over. The next one will scream your name. Was it a metaphor, a taunt, or a threat meant just for her? Sheriff Holt called an emergency meeting. It wasn't just about protecting the town anymore. It was personal. He wants us to chase him, Holt said, pacing in front of a map pinned with red dots. He thinks he's smarter, but we have something he doesn't expect. What? Asked Sarah, her voice ragged. A trap. Claire Jensen, one of the names on the list, had agreed to help. It took convincing, and the presence of 2 armed officers at all times. But she wanted this nightmare to end. They would stage her walking home after a shift at the diner. Same route, same time. Sarah and Holt would be close in unmarked vehicles. Backup would be stationed at intersections. Snipers placed on rooftops. If he bites, Holt said, we take him alive. No mistakes. The night was too quiet. Even the wind had stopped moving. Claire walked slowly down the sidewalk, arms wrapped tightly around herself. She passed the dark windows of closed shops, the glow of the diner fading behind her. Her footsteps echoed in the empty street. Somewhere nearby, Sarah held her breath. Minutes passed. Nothing. Then Claire reached the alley behind the library. Movement. Sarah saw it. A figure slipping from the shadows, walking too casually. He wore a tan jacket, a baseball cap, just like Teresa Langley had described. Sarah radioed, suspect approaching. All units hold. The man quickened his pace. Claire looked back, pretended to stumble. He reached for her. Now! Sarah shouted. Lights flooded the alley. Officers swarmed. The man bolted but was tackled hard to the pavement. A mask fell from his pocket. Not a ski mask. A vintage rubber disguise molded to look like someone else. A crude version of Ted Bundy. They cuffed him, yanked off the cap. He was young, mid-20s, gaunt face, cold, calculating eyes. But it wasn't over. That's not him, Claire whispered, trembling. At the station, the man gave a name, Dylan Crane. No priors, no prints on file. But when they searched his apartment, they found binders filled with photos of women from Elk River, taken without their knowledge. Parks, outside stores, at the library. He confessed to watching Melissa Hayworth. Said he studied her, but he swore he didn't kill her. Swore someone else had beaten him to it. He knew what I was doing, Dylan muttered, staring at the table. He left me a note. Said she was his. Who? Sarah asked, heart racing. The Echo. Dylan slid a note across the table. It had been folded into his mattress. "You're just a parasite. This town is mine now. If you want to live, disappear, or I'll make you part of the collection." So the echo was real, and he was watching other monsters. Back in Sarah's apartment, sleep was impossible. She stared at her window blinds, wondering if someone was outside, watching, waiting. She grabbed the manifesto again. Read every word. Then something hit her. One of the newspaper clippings was from a local blog, not a major paper. It had never been printed. "How did he get this?" she asked aloud. She traced the article. It had only been published in one place, the Elk River High School newsletter, digitally, and edited by Naomi Fields. Her name, the second name on the list. Sarah raced to Naomi's house. Lights were on, curtains drawn, but no one answered the door. She pounded harder. Finally, Naomi's mother answered, groggy and confused. She said she was going to meet a friend for a school project. "Who?" "A boy," said his name was Todd. Sarah ran. They tracked Naomi's phone to a location near the old sawmill, long abandoned. It was a trap. Again, they entered with guns drawn. The smell of rot and rust filled the air. Chains still hung from the ceiling like vines. In the far corner, Naomi was tied to a chair, duct tape over her mouth, eyes wide with terror, and behind her a figure moved. He raised a knife. Shots rang out. The figure dropped. Sarah rushed forward, cutting Naomi free, trembling. The man was dead. No ID, but a notebook in his coat read, "Echoes never die." He wasn't the echo, just another voice in the madness. And the real killer was still out there. Elk River had turned into a fortress. Helicopters buzzed above the rooftops like angry wasps. Police checkpoints lined the main roads. Every local gas station, diner, and motel had a printed copy of the surveillance still from the gas station. A man in a tan workwear jacket and baseball cap. The killer had a name now, well, a fake one, Kyle T. Bundy. But Sarah Klein knew better. This wasn't just a man mimicking a monster. This was a predator who had become a phantom. At the Elk River station, Sarah pored over every word in the journal they found in the Duluth P.O. box. The writer's tone wasn't just twisted, it was intimate, as if he were speaking to her directly. He described her by name, her voice, her badge number. He even referenced her late husband, David. Only a handful of people knew about David's suicide. This man wasn't just watching the town. He was watching her. She took the journal and drove home. Her house, tucked behind the woods on Ash Hollow Road, had always felt like a safe place. But now it was too quiet. She locked the doors, shut the blinds, and opened the journal again. On the last page, beneath the message, "The next one will scream your name," she noticed a faint smudge. Rubbing lightly with a cotton swab, she saw it was a fingerprint. Her breath caught. Maybe, just maybe, they had something. She rushed it to the lab. Within 24 hours, the results came in. Partial match. Not in the federal database, but it had a hit on a small local arrest from years back. A teenage boy named Carter Hale, once arrested for breaking and entering. No relation to any previous victims. But Carter Hale had vanished 6 years ago. Gone completely off the grid. Sarah pulled the file. Carter had been 16. Bright, bookish, bullied. His parents had filed a missing persons report after he failed to come home from a debate tournament. His backpack was found under a bridge, but no body. Assumed dead. Case closed. Until now. She printed his yearbook photo. When she compared it to the blurry surveillance image from the gas station, her heart stopped. The bone structure, the jawline, the way he tilted his head. It was him. Older, hardened, but definitely him. Sheriff Holt wasn't convinced. "You're basing this on a ghost, Sarah." "No," she said. "I'm basing it on a pattern. And he's not a ghost. He's Carter Hale. And he's here." They pulled his old school records, friends, teachers, his favorite hangouts. One name popped up again and again. A former teacher, Ms. Riley, who still lived on the edge of town. Sarah and Holt paid her a visit. Ms. Riley was kind, soft-spoken, but immediately tense when Carter's name was mentioned. She hadn't heard from him in years, but admitted he'd always been different. He talked about how murder wasn't about hate, she said. He said it was about correction, like he wanted to fix something broken. Before they left, Ms. Riley said something that stuck with Sarah. He always wore masks, even as a child. Said it helped him feel real. Back at the station, another call came in. This one from a pawn shop on the outskirts of town. The owner had seen the gas station photo and recognized the tan jacket. A man wearing one came in the day before and bought a hunting knife, paid in cash. The clerk remembered something odd. He had this stare, the clerk said, like he wasn't looking at me, like he was looking through me. They pulled the security footage. There he was, face obscured, but body language familiar. He moved like someone confident in shadows, like someone who didn't just want to hide, he wanted to be found. Sarah stared at the footage for hours. That night, she drove home again, nervous, wired. She double-checked her locks, turned on every light in the house. Her dog, Milo, paced nervously. Something felt off. Around midnight, her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered. A whisper. Just one line. You never asked why David killed himself. Silence. Then the call ended. Sarah froze. No one, not even her closest colleagues, knew the full story of David's death. He'd been a state trooper. He'd taken his own life in their basement. He left no note, and Sarah had buried that pain deep. Her hands shook as she called the trace team. They tried to triangulate the call, but it was masked. A burner again. Milo growled. She turned and saw movement outside the kitchen window. A shadow moving quickly, disappearing into the tree line. She grabbed her gun, raced out, but by the time she reached the woods, nothing. The next morning, a package arrived at the station. No return address, just her name handwritten. Inside, a wedding photo, her and David, and a piece of rope. Sarah sat down, shaken, angry, determined. This wasn't about Elk River anymore. This was personal. She wasn't hunting a killer. She was hunting a reflection of grief, a pain, of something broken long ago. She knew now what had to be done. We bait him, she said to Holt. We stage a trap, something public, something tempting. A town hall meeting was scheduled that weekend. A vigil for Melissa. Dozens would attend. Sarah would be there, front and center, with sniper teams in place, with hidden cameras, and with one clear objective: catch Carter Hale, alive. But in the pit of her stomach, she knew the echo wasn't done echoing. The vigil for Melissa drew a crowd that Elk River hadn't seen in decades. Candles flickered like tiny stars in the evening wind. Parents clutched their children a little tighter. Teenagers whispered in nervous groups. Photographers flashed their lenses at mourners. But above all, the air buzzed with one question. Would he show? Sarah Klein stood on the small wooden stage erected in the town square, flanked by Sheriff Holt and a few officers dressed in plain clothes. Her voice, when she took the mic, didn't waver, but inside, she was a whirlwind of dread and determination. This wasn't just a speech. This was bait. She looked out across the candlelit faces and began. Melissa was more than a victim. She was a daughter, a student, a friend. And tonight, we don't just remember her. We make a promise. We will bring her killer to justice. Applause followed, quiet but resolute. Somewhere in that crowd, she believed the killer, Carter Hale, was watching. They had stationed tactical teams on nearby rooftops, snipers scanning every inch of the crowd. Every incoming face was recorded. Facial recognition ran in real time, but there were no alarms, no matches, not yet. As the vigil ended, Sarah walked off stage into the shadows. She needed air, but more than that, she needed to feel the ground under her feet. She'd barely rounded the corner when her radio crackled to life. Suspicious male, northwest quadrant, headed toward you, ball cap, gray hoodie. Her heart jumped. She turned slowly, hand on her holster. Footsteps, fast then slowing. Out stepped a young man, Tall, lean, not threatening, but familiar. The jawline, the eyes. Her grip tightened. "Ma'am," he said, lowering his hood. "I need to talk to you." "I knew Melissa." Sarah narrowed her eyes. "What's your name?" "Chris. Chris Landon. I went to school with her. We used to ride the same bus." Her gut told her it wasn't him. Still, she motioned to Holt, who quickly led him away for questioning. Just a scare. Just a shadow. But Carter was good at shadows. That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She reviewed every face at the vigil, slowing frames, zooming in on strangers, listening to background chatter on the recordings. Something had to be there. At 3:42 a.m., she paused one video. A man in the back of the crowd. He never clapped, never looked up, baseball cap pulled low. But the way he moved, rigid, mechanical, as if just playing a part. She enhanced the frame, tried facial matching. Nothing. But then she ran it against Carter Hale's high school footage, using motion comparison instead of facial. 90% match. She bolted upright. It was him. The next day, they combed nearby traffic cams, and eventually, Sarah caught a glimpse of the man exiting the square and entering a dark blue sedan. No plates, but they traced the car to an abandoned lot north of town. Fresh tire marks, footprints, a fast food wrapper, and under a loose board in the old watchman's booth, another journal. This one was different. It wasn't about Sarah. It was about David. It detailed his final weeks, his moments of despair, his calls for help. Carter had been watching them for over a decade. Sarah stared at the pages, nauseous. He mentioned moments she thought were private. Her and David arguing late at night, a broken porch light she never fixed, a single glass left on the counter. He had been there, in their world, invisible. And in the last entry he wrote, "You were always the better detective, but you never solved David. Maybe I will." Sarah dropped the journal. Her hands trembled. Holt found her in the parking lot, vomiting behind a squad car. "We need to shut this down," he said. "Cancel the next vigil. Bring in the feds." But Sarah shook her head. "He won't talk to them. He wants me." So they set a trap. Not another vigil. A fake confession. They released a press statement that a suspect was in custody and had confessed. A name was given. Eli Thompson, a vagrant with no connection to the victims. It was a lie, but a lie Carter would hear. And he did. That night, Sarah returned home to find her front door slightly ajar. Gun drawn, she stepped inside. Silence. Then her phone buzzed. One new video. It was footage of her sleeping. Last night, in her bed. From inside the room. The message underneath. "You brought this home, Sarah. Now home is where I wait." She turned and saw something on the wall. Polaroid. Of her and David. But something was off. Behind them, faint, barely visible in the trees. A face. Watching. Carter Hale had never left Elk River. He had always been there. Watching. Waiting. And now he wanted her to remember. Even shadows cast echoes. The air in Elk River was different that morning. Heavy. Pregnant with tension. The whole town felt like it was holding its breath. Word had spread fast about the vigil for Melissa Carver. Flyers were taped to storefronts, pinned to corkboards, even slid into mailboxes. What no one knew, except a select few officers and Sarah Klein, was that this vigil was bait. Sarah sat on the edge of the stage in the town square, her badge hidden under a long gray coat. She wore a black ribbon on her wrist like everyone else, a symbol of mourning. But beneath her calm expression, her heart was a drumbeat of adrenaline. Snipers had taken up positions on the rooftops. Undercover agents were scattered through the crowd. Hidden cameras were tucked into flower pots, lampposts, and the gazebo. They were ready, but the man they were waiting for didn't come like a villain in a movie. He slipped in unnoticed, a ghost among mourners. At exactly 7:15 p.m., as the mayor lit a candle and spoke Melissa's name, Sarah caught a flicker of motion. A man in a dark hoodie, hands in his pockets, head bowed low, walked toward the edge of the square. Her eyes locked on him. Something about the way he moved. She whispered into her mic, "Position C." southeast perimeter. Possible visual. Sniper teams adjusted. The crowd, unaware, murmured prayers and held candles. Then it happened. A scream, high and sharp. A woman near the bakery pointed. "He has a knife!" Chaos exploded. People ran. Candles dropped. Sarah drew her weapon and sprinted. But the man was already moving, weaving through the panic like he'd rehearsed it 100 times. Officers chased. Civilians ducked. Holt tackled someone, wrong guy. Sarah followed the blur of the hoodie down Main Street, past shuttered shops and out toward the edge of the woods. He was fast, but she was driven. "Carter!" she shouted. He stopped, turned, and smiled. It was him. Older, yes, weathered, but those eyes, intelligent, hollow, burning. "You remembered my name," he said. "That's sweet. Put the knife down." He tilted his head. "It was never about the knife, Sarah. It was about the silence. The way this town forgets. You killed innocent people. I corrected them." A gunshot cracked the sky. He flinched. Sarah ducked. A warning shot from a sniper. Carter ran. Into the woods. Sarah followed, heart pounding, boots crunching dead leaves. The trees closed around them, swallowing the world whole. She lost sight of him. Then a whisper. "Do you know why David died?" She froze. "You don't get to speak his name." "He found me first." Her stomach turned. "He caught me breaking into your house, Sarah. I was just a boy then. He didn't arrest me. He offered me help, took me into the garage, tried to talk me down." Silence. "But he saw it, saw the darkness, and he knew he couldn't save me." Sarah gritted her teeth. "You're lying." "Am I?" A rustle behind her. She spun. Too late. He tackled her, sending her gun flying. They struggled in the dirt. His hands were cold, strong. He tried to pin her, but she kneed him hard. Rolled. Reached for a rock. Slammed it into his temple. He fell back, dazed. She grabbed her gun. Stood over him, shaking. "Do it," he whispered. "Prove you're not better than me." She didn't pull the trigger. Instead, she clicked her radio. "Suspect in custody. Location pinging now." Minutes later, Holt and the team arrived. Carter was cuffed, bloodied, silent. The trial was swift. The journal, the footage, the fingerprints, the evidence was overwhelming. But what stunned the courtroom most wasn't the proof. It was Carter himself. He smiled through it all. Smiled as families wept. Smiled as Sarah testified. Smiled when the judge read the sentence. Life without parole. Afterward, as Sarah walked out into the cold afternoon sun, a reporter asked, "What do you think he wanted?" She paused. "To be remembered, even if it meant being feared." She didn't give him that. She never said his name again. For more chilling true crime content, subscribe to the channel.